Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Dirt podcast. I'm Hunter Slifka, and this is Neil Schaefer, and today we got our first special guest, Tim Sadler from Reicks View Farms, and we're going to turn it over right to him and let him kind of give a background and talk to us and tell us what you can do at Reicks View Farms.
So at Reicks View Farms, I'm a finishing supervisor. So I have about 10 to 12 employees, and we run finishing barns. So obviously, you guys know that there's less and less farmers each day, and so they were kind of our main people who chore our sites, load the pigs, vaccinate, things like that. And so because we're having less farmers, we're struggling to find guys to be growers for us. So we just started in the last couple months, just having these guys that are here on visas, tour the sites, vaccinate, load out, things like that. Basically, our own employees running it instead of having contract growers. So it's a rather new department, but I'm basically just managing them, training them, helping them where needed. Uh, yeah, just trying to get them up and running and get this department going in the right direction and being as efficient and effective as possible for Reichsview. So I should back up. When I say finishing, there's kind of three general sections of the pig production. It's kind of like the sow farms, which would be like the piglets where they're produced, where they're born. Nursery, so that's when they're weaned. They have to learn to eat food or eat solid feed, the grind feed we make. And then they're there for a couple months and then they go to finishing. And so that's my department. So we kind of have them, usually we say we want to get them around like 40 to 50 pounds and then we grow them depending on what packer we want to send them to, anywhere from 270 to 300 pounds. And then we load them out and go to the packer. Once the barn's empty, wash, disinfect, and start all over again.
Yeah, before we dig too deep into the pig industry and more of what you do and stuff, why don't you give us a kind of brief update and background as far as what you did before Reichs View as far as schooling and if you had any other kind of significant jobs and that sort of thing that led you down to this path.
Yeah, so I kind of had a windy road. So I went to a high school called Elburnett. It was a small 1A high school right north of Cedar Rapids. Always knew I wanted to be in agriculture. My family, we kind of grew up in a neighborhood that was we had neighbors right next door, but our field or our backyard was a field, I always say. So it's like, we got to go crick stomping and go squirrel hunting and things like that, but we didn't really have animals. So a lot of my agriculture experiences was going to aunts and uncles and cousins and helping them with their dairy or riding the combine, things like that. Senior year, I think I got chickens for the first time, and that was pretty big. I felt like I was really farming then. Was active in FFA, knew I loved ag. All 4 years of high school during the summer, I would pollinate for Pioneer. And that was a super cool experience, just learning the different hybrids. And it would be an all summer long thing. As soon as you graduated that year from whatever grade you were in, we'd start doing stand counts and emergence things. Um, and we'd be out in the field thinning our test plots. And then, once corn got bigger and started pollinating, we'd be cross pollinating certain breeds. So did that. Knew I wanted to go to Iowa State. Did one visit, loved it. Went to Iowa State. Started in agronomy because I was, corn was all I knew. I thought, well, this would be the best. Freshman year, interned at Advantage FS in Alburnett. Went pretty good. It was, the most agriculture I'd been involved in. Sophomore year, I interned at Heartland Co-op in Conroy, Iowa, kind of around like Williamsburg area. Love my bosses, great places to work, but kind of got repetitive. It's just so agronomy can sometimes be so in depth, and I was like, I want to do more. And so my junior year internship, I called my cousins over in Waukon, Iowa, and said, I just want to just farm. That's all I want to do. They have beef cows, sow farm for Reichsview, and row crop. And I was like, I just want to do it all. I don't want to be doing one thing. So I thought I was just going to get to farm and it'd be easy and fun. And it turns out they kind of just stuck me in the sow farm. And I actually loved it. It was fun. Pigs were different. They have different attitudes every day. It's just, there's always a different challenge. So after that internship, I went back my senior year and changed my major to ag studies. And I just minored in agronomy. And so I knew I wanted to do pigs or work with pigs. And so senior year at the career fair, I bumped into Reicks U and kind of talked to them and said I'd intern with my cousins who contract growers and blah blah, and wanted to work in a sow farm, and so they get me a sow farm up here, and they said either live in New Hampton or Cresco, and drove through both towns, and I thought, well, Cresco seemed pretty nice, and they had a fitness center, and so moved here. So that was 2018. Isaac Hover is my first boss, so obviously he's your classmate, so introduced me to you, a lot of your guys' classmates. Met Neil. Worked in the sow farm in Chester for about 2.5 years. And then I just needed something different, and so I transitioned into finishing. And so now I've been into finishing for about 2.5 years as well. So kind of a windy road of agronomy and then sow farm and then finishing and whatnot. But
That's a lot of stuff in a compressed amount of time. But it gave you a lot of experience in the different, especially understanding how the growing of the crops to feed the pigs, to working in the feed mill. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was one thing. I can't remember who I was talking about, but obviously Reicks View, they cut a lot of corn acres, and I was talking to someone. I was like, man, I wonder how long that lasts. And they were saying that all the crops that they take out last, I want to say, was it maybe 2 months or something before they have to start buying extra crops from other producers around the area and stuff.
yeah, I think my numbers might be outdated, but I think it was like we do like 13,000 acres of corn, and that corn supplies us for 30% of the year or something like that. So it's just a crazy, the amount of corn that the pigs are going through if we're just buying like none other. So
You're working in a finishing unit right now. About how many pigs do you interact with each year?
wow, that's a tricky number. So I would say right now, my team and I have about 66,000 spaces. So I think we're up to like 15 or 16 barns. Everyone's different sizes, different number of pigs. And you almost do 3 turns a year based on kind of how it falls. So roughly 200,000, I guess, would be a good estimate on if you do 2.5 turns. So, yeah, we're hoping to grow that. But yeah, I guess when I do that number, it's a lot of pigs for a year.
Pigs. I think what's really cool too about what you do is you're supervising. You said 12 employees, kind of oversee the operations, but you're also helping manage a few other barns and actually getting in there, getting your hands dirty, sorting the pigs, getting them loaded, that sort of thing, doing the chores every day. And so a lot of people think of supervisors and they think of someone who just stands back and tells other people what to do. I find it pretty impressive that you're getting down in there, jumping in there, getting muddy, getting dirty, and actually doing the hard work.
Yeah, I laugh. So outside of Reicks View, I'm a contract grower for a farmer in Winnebago County. And so he pays me like a contract grower, and outside of work, I raise the pigs, chore them, load them, things like that. Which you guys have obviously helped me in the nick of time when we'll tell that story. But so yeah, that was just a cool experience because it was something to keep me busy, and it was like, for my position originally, I was kind of the supervisor, where I used to be the supervisor for all these farmers, these contract growers, and it's hard to relate to some of the things they have to do or their time commitment. And then once I became one, then I like understood, oh, this is what they like, this is what they have to deal with, this is the easy parts, the hard parts, whatever. And it just feels a little more like ownership. It's like those pigs, they're not mine, they're Reicks View's, and they're paying this farmer to rent the space, but it feels like for the 2.5 months they're mine and they're my care, and I get to grow them, and selling them feels really rewarding to see the weights come back and the health, and like, wow, I did that. And so, so on the side, I'm treating them, loading them, ordering feed, kind of lining up the washing and the maintenance of the barn as needed, things like that.
Well, it definitely opened my eyes. One day, Hunter asked me, "Hey, you want to come help me load some pigs?" And I'm like, "Wow!" I hadn't had any interaction with pigs since I was 11 years old, because we used to raise feral pigs, and we sold them when they were like 40 pounds, and so I was like, "Heck yeah, I'm always up for something." So we head out there and get into our suits and boots, and when I grew up, you saw a lot of pigs in lots and different things, but now people just drive and they see the building, so a lot of people don't know what's going on inside. I thought that was so eye-opening to see how they're penned and how you sort them, and to the whole loading process. I enjoyed every minute of it. It was a sweaty, hot. It was in the middle of winter. We were just sweating. I mean, it gets warm in there, but it was so. I always say people should experience other things before they comment too much on things because they don't really know. I didn't know, so I was always like, that's kind of interesting. I had been in a brand new building before pigs went in. I had never been into a building when the pigs were there, so that was a new experience for me, and I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tim, maybe we should have backed up a little bit, but do you want to kind of just go through and explain what your finishing barn, as far as if someone were to walk in that front door and start walking through the building, what are they going to kind of start to see, smell, interact? I mean, what's their kind of environment going to be like? Because a lot of people probably either never been in one, or maybe have a misconception or a different picture in their mind what actually goes on in a finishing barn.
Yeah. So the most common barn sizes we build right now are about 2,500 or 2,500 pigs. Sometimes we'll build two of them next to each other at the hallway or something like that. But basically, we have a small office. It's probably 15 by 20. And you go in and you just have like our paperwork. Biosecurity is a big thing. If Isaac comes on, he'll talk a lot about that because he works with that a lot. But basically, you come into the barn and you step over this barricade, and you have your boots on the outside, and you step in, and then we have our coveralls, our gloves, any of our supplies, and it's a pretty small office. And then when you go into the barn, usually we have about 36 pens per room. There's 2 rooms, so there's a center concrete wall down the middle, and it's just gates, feeders, and pigs. And so our feed lines are automatic, so the pigs have feed whenever. There's water nipples usually right below the feed, so they can mix it. They kind of like to have their feed wet. They're on slats, so any of their manure or feces goes into the pit, and they're not laying in it. So it's actually kind of funny because people have a vision that pigs are dirty. When you go in there, the pigs are actually pretty clean.
Mm-hmm.
They prefer to stay clean. They'll actually kind of go to the bathroom like in the corners or somewhere. That way they don't have to lay in it. And so, yeah, it's just a wide open room. The barns are temperature controlled. So a lot of the reason we don't raise them outside is because like right now it'd be freezing cold in the morning. The pigs would probably be coughing and sick. And so if they're in our barns, we can have it settings where if it dips below 65 degrees, the heaters kick on and raise it. And then in the summer, we have lots of fans. So we'll drop our curtain, turn all our fans, pull that cool air in. So just keeping them away from the predators, keeping them isolated, helps the movement of diseases, limits that. And then they grow better, they're healthy, they're cleaner. So it's kind of, it's hard to explain to people because biosecurity is such a big thing with pigs compared to some other animals. So we can't just bring people through, especially when pigs are there. So a lot of people's experiences are like yours, Neil's. Seeing an empty barn, kind of hard to relate what it looks like with pigs in there. Which is why we get to do some cool things at Reicks View, like do farm chats. So usually we have like Isaac, myself, and another coworker, and we'll Skype teachers or classes. And Isaac will be in the sow farm, so he'll show them a piglet, a farrowing crate, mother sow, their heat mats, why we raise them the way that we do. And then I'll be 20 miles away in a finisher, and I'll show them, well, this pig is now 50 pounds, not 2 pounds, and why our barns look different and why we do what we do. And it's kind of cool because most of the kids have never seen an animal before, never stepped in a finisher. And even the teachers are always like, wow, that was really cool. Can we do that again? So, yeah, we try to educate people on what, is in a barn and why we can't just bring people in and open up transparency.
There's something that is pretty unique to our community. The Howard County Fair has a educational facility out there the Reicks View family have contributed to. And so years ago when I was a kid, there's a lot of farms, like you were saying. A lot of people brought pigs to the fair. A lot of kids were showing. And every year it got smaller and smaller and smaller because there were fewer independent hog farmers. So they began this hog center and the interaction that you have during the Howard County Fair, especially. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my dates might be wrong, so it was before I came here, but I think the Ag Education Center went in like 2016, I believe. But I kind of got involved in 2020 when I really got into finishing. So basically, it's just an opportunity for kids that don't have access to either swine or dairy. So there's two sides to show animals. So much like me growing up, I didn't have access, didn't have a farmer that would give me, a pig or a cow to show. So the building itself is the swine side on one side, which is a real hog confinement. We have a pit, we have fans, we have heat, everything, controllers. And then we have the dairy side on the other side, and they have a little milking parlor. They have lots of excess room over there. They have some other animals they use. And then the middle is a show arena. And so the Hueys run the dairy operation. I think they've done it the whole time, and they have an amazing number of students, and the kids love that. And then we help run the swine side, and so we have the students shower in and shower out just like a sow farm. So they come in, shower, wear the hog confinement specific clothes, and they just basically chore their pig, get it up, walk it around, make sure it's doing okay, it doesn't have a limp, things like that. I think we charge the kids like $15. It's kind of just want to give them some skin in the game. They rent that pig. We supply the feed, the water, the medicine. I chore them every day. So those kids usually get them around like I think 60 pounds, and then they raise them to weight for the fair. They show them. They can win their ribbons. They can win their whatever, and then they get to sell that pig as well. They get to sell their ribbon, I should say. And so it's kind of for $15, you don't have to put anything else into it. And then, a lot of these companies in town and the county are so generous. They, usually sell pretty high. So it's a win-win for the kids. They love it. They get to learn about agriculture. We're happy because they're learning, they're enjoying it. We're hoping that maybe some of them will want to go to be a vet or want to go to be something in pork production and come back.
But that's a key element for living in a rural area, because when I was a kid, a lot of people grew up on farms, so they were used to being around hogs, chickens, cows, and things like that. So now you've got these generations that might be maybe 2 or 3 generations removed from the farm, and they're still actually able to have hands-on. And I think one of the highlights is the sow end of it. You got 3 sows in there that farrow out. So you're at the fair, and I hear kids, "Did you go see the little baby piglets yet?" And then you go down there, and people are holding the little pigs, and I mean that's very special, because when I was a kid, I remember how special that was when pigs were having babies or sheep were having lambs and things like that. But there's nothing like seeing that little pig in your hand that really kind of connects you to that industry, where we've had this there was a disconnect for a while, and I think this helps get that bond back to where it should be.
Yeah, we bring in 3 sows, and we have like the actual sow farrowing crates, which have a lot of misconceptions. People think why they're in it, things like that. So it's easy for us to have. I guess we bring in the sows in 3 days before the fair. They usually farrow on like Friday, Saturday of the fair, and people are right there. We give the kids the towels. It's kind of cute. They'll have like 10 kids lined up, and they're just ready for a piglet. And so we pull a piglet out, and you give them the towel, and they're just like eyeballs get big, and we're like, dry it off, and what do you want to name it? And usually like Porky is the first one, and Wilbur, it's all the common names. And they love it. And then we put them in the crate and explain, this is a farrowing crate. This gives the piglets a separate safe place away from the mother, so she can get up and down and not lay on them or hurt them. And even like the adults come in, and we'll have, someone will be taking a video of one get birthed, and then they'll be crying, and we're like, "Are you okay?" We're like, it's just so beautiful. And so, like you said, it used to be a lot of people said, well, I grew up around pigs, or my parents had pigs, where now we're a couple generations removed, where most of these kids have never seen any animals at all. And so just to see the process of a sow farrowing and seeing a piglet, getting to name it and touch it, it's a pretty cool thing for people.
Well, and plus that we have it here in Howard County at our county fair, which I think is one of the best county fairs in the state to begin with. But when you go down to the Iowa State Fair, you got to stand in line for like a half an hour to 45 minutes to see baby pigs being born and get to see them like that. So here where people are coming in and out, and so I don't know. I find that to be one of the highlights of the fair, to go out and see the baby pigs. So.
Yeah, usually we have right away on Thursday. It seems like people are knocking on the door, and do you have the baby pigs yet? Do we have? Well, not yet. We're waiting. We want to get a lot of people, or we'll have kids that'll put it in their towel, and then they kind of start walking out the door, and it's like, nope, you got to bring that pig back. And they'll say, well, I want to go home with it. It's like, oh, sorry, can't take the pig. So it's a
Get
fun
your
thing.
own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they love it. And,
Sure.
Well, that education center, I mean, it presents so many awesome opportunities and ideas, and obviously it's a great educational purpose. But I think one of the coolest things is the community education part of it. I mean, a lot of people think of a hog building, they think of the smell, they think of stink, that sort of thing. You go walk out there when it's ripe in the summer during the fair, and there's almost zero smells. The different fans and different things they put in, and you can talk about a little bit more. I know that was one of the biggest concerns, especially with the public and the community in the town of Cresco and stuff. And I think that mantra got stomped out really, really quick once I got up and running.
yeah, it's kind of crazy that when you explain to people like this is pigs on slats in a pit, basically in the center of town, and they're always like, what? How does that work? With the smell. So, most barns, we have our fans that pull the warm air out to cool the pigs. And so I don't even know when it was invented, but they kind of discovered that if we basically trickle water through like thin layers of cardboard and we pull that air through it, it collects like the dust particles and the actual particles in the air, which is a lot of the smell. And so it basically acts as a filter for us. And then all that air coming out, the smell is just way minimal. And so, yeah, we have that running. So when the fans are on, that's misting or sprinkling on the cardboard, pulling that air, cleaning it. That way, no one in town's affected by the smell or anything. And so, that's a pretty big hit. I laugh. I talked to the county workers one time because they're kind of right where the fans are blowing. And I asked them, does it bother you? Do you ever? And they're like, nope, never bothers us. And they're always just right there. So it's pretty cool that we can show people that we have this perception of pigs being in mud and pigs smelling and all this. And it's like, well, that was the old days. Now things are changed, they're different. And so
Do you have to replace that cardboard every so often or every year, or is that a longevity deal, or how does that work?
so it's only these, I guess, panels of cardboard are only used for 4 or 5 months out of the year when we actually have the pigs in there. We shut it kind of down and turn everything off when we're not there, so they have a chance to dry and get firm again. But I think if we did have them running year round, we'd probably have to change them every year or two, just because the dust particles and things like that. So we've washed them a few times, but like cardboard that gets wet, you wash it, gets beat up, and then you just have to replace it and get new
Just like a
stuff.
furnace filter, have to replace it every so often.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you have any idea on what that system costs to implement?
So I don't. It's actually, I think, rather cheap. Your fans are already pulling your air out, and so basically what it is it's a separate little like pit for clean water, and we have a sump pump down there, and we just buy the sump pump at Farm and Home here, and it runs up, and it just has like, I think this one's only 10 foot wide, so it has 4 sprinklers, and they literally just shoot the water right on the cardboard, and then it drains down back into the pit and recycles. So you got a little bit of electricity. I think the cardboard chunks are rather cheap. You already have the fans, a little bit of PVC and Mr. Lines, but it's rather cheap. And
So it's not like you're even having to use fresh water, new water the entire time. I mean, that was something that I didn't understand or didn't know right away is whenever you guys are going and doing chores every single day, you're taking down those water meters. And so they're calculating and keeping an eye on how much water is getting used every single day, twice a day sometimes. And so it if you get a pipe that bursts or something that's broke, I mean, you're gonna find it pretty dang quick. And so it's not just when you guys are choring, walk in, check things and done. I mean, they're really keeping a really close eye onto how much is being used, feed, that sort of thing.
yeah, so a lot of our barns even have, as we advance, or get more technology, our alarms getting more complex. So it used to be you just kind of check the water, glance that, if everything's working, looks good. Well, now we're writing down our water temperatures. So we know I went through 2,000 gallons yesterday and I went through 2,100 today, nothing, no big deal. Or sometimes you'll go in there and it'll drop from 2,000 yesterday to 700 gallons. And then you can kind of notice right away, pigs stop drinking, well, they're sick, or something like that. So it's more of it's a health thing as well as making sure our pit doesn't fill up. If it jumps 500 gallons, we might have a leaky water nipple or a line that's leaking. And then our alarms are hooked up to all those. So, if it's midnight and for some reason the well goes out and our pressure drops below 20 psi, right away starts calling people saying, hey, there's something with your water. We have temperature alarms. So a lot of ours, I have it set between like 80 degrees and 60 degrees. So if it all of a sudden gets above 80 degrees, it's calling saying, hey, something's wrong, you need to go check it out. Or it gets below 60, it's calling, hey, it's cold in your barn, you need to go check it out. So power, water, we even have feed alarms now. So if the bin happens to run empty and we don't catch it, it'll call and say, hey, the feed's running out, they're going to run out of feed soon. So it's a pretty 24/7 job sometimes, especially if you have 15 or 20 barns and there's something can happen at one barn every day and whatnot. So
Are you, as your position right now, say you get that alarm at midnight that the well went dry or whatever, is that your job then to go there and start calling the people needed to get that fixed or get it kind of situated?
yeah, so it used to be when I was with contract growers in the area, they were first, maybe they had a neighbor or wife or someone second, and then the finishing supervisor, and then my boss or manager. But now, since we're with the growers, it's either myself or my employees first, and then myself or my employees second, and then maybe my coworker third. We're all three on the line. So I think it calls one number, waits like a minute, calls the next number. It just kind of goes down the list and then it starts over again. So it kind of depends on where the barn is, who's available. Sometimes it's during the day, so if you're an hour away, the other guy's going to get it. But yeah, that's kind of one of the aspects of my job right now. And so we're working on getting everybody trained how to answer the alarms and hopefully stop the alarms and get everyone's phones on the list. So
Yeah, as far as training, I mean, how much of this did you learn while you were at Iowa State, and how much of it was on the job learning experience?
yeah, well, I actually only got to take one class related to swine at Iowa State because I changed my major so late. And then, like, our main class we had to take to graduate overlapped with the swine class. So I didn't even get to take our basic swine class. But I did take an it's called Ag 450, where you just literally run the farm, and we had a finisher there. So that was my first, I guess, besides the sow farm, that was my first experience of a finisher. And then a lot of it was just on the job, just learning as you do, which I know, like you guys talked about, I think last episode, you just can't learn it all in books, and when you get here, you just learn so much more, and it clicks, it makes sense because you're doing it right there and then.
Yeah, I think what it really boils down to, and we kind of got a different array of expertise and education levels and stuff, but I mean, anytime you go to any kind of formal education, it's going to give you some baseline knowledge. It's going to give you some maybe like baseline ways to work on things or think about different things. But ultimately, you got to get on the job. You got to be working first person interaction with different guys and whatever, and actually learn on the job on how to do it. But I mean, even like with our job here, we just had a Skype the other day where they completely changed one of our CRP programs. And so you could have been a 20, 30-year employee and could have been even the guy running the CRP program, and then once you make that switch, you got to be able to make that adaptation and figure it out from there. And I'm sure the swine industry is the same way. I mean, every day they probably come out with new antibiotics or new medicine or whatever it may be as far as growing pigs at a faster rate of gain and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
One cool thing that I didn't really know either is you guys are actually medicating through a drip line with your pigs, and if you want to talk about that as far as like the diseases or how you guys are medicating and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so like I said, most of our finishers, we have 2 rooms, and so we have 2 separate medicators. And so basically, there's a tipping point, so we will treat by hand, a small injection if a pig is coughing or lame or needs it. But after a certain point, it's like 20% or 30%. If once there's so many pigs are coughing or so many pigs are sick, it's more beneficial for them to treat them as a group because you're kind of preventing it for some, hopefully medicating, treating, taking care of it for some. So we have, common things like aspirin or amoxicillin, things that, you use on people or other animals. And we mix it up in just big garbage cans with water, and it drips. It's like, I don't even know what it is, 2 ounces per so many gallons. And so it's just a dribble of medication. We run it for a few days, and then we just kind of monitor the pigs. It helps with draws. We have to keep all the paperwork on our medicine because all these pigs we're eating too. So we don't want medicine, and nobody wants medicine. So a lot of our medications are 2 weeks, 1 week. We have a couple that are only in them for 3 days. So we've kind of some quick hitting medicines that it's just a dribble, a small amount that can make a big difference for them.
And it does. Go ahead, Neil.
I was just going to say, kind of getting back to like the feed and the amount of corn that the hogs are eating. I remember back in the 90s, we were talking a lot about value added, because what we were doing in Iowa was we were really good at growing corn, really good at growing soybeans. What were we doing? We were hauling them to the river and down the river on a barge, and someone else was adding value to them. So the big push was, let's add value here in Iowa before we send that product on. Livestock was the perfect opportunity for that, whether it's dairy or hogs, because there was a study done, and the counties that had the most livestock had the most economic activity within that community, because that dollar spins around within that community, not only just buying that grain and things. But I can't remember the stats somewhere, but you could see like what percentage of the corn and stuff was being exported per county. And I think honestly right now Howard County is like a net importer of grain, because whether it's going to the ethanol plant or you're getting DDGs back to feed, things like that. I mean, we're adding so much value, whether it's ethanol or pork or milk. I think that's huge, and that's a huge economic driver for the state of Iowa too.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, yeah, the demand for the corn in our county, I think, is very high. And then, it's kind of funny because we don't ever sell corn to the ethanol plant because we need it so much. So we're kind of competitor trying to buy corn, but then we're buying DDGs from them. I think we go down to, I think it's Vinton near like Cedar Rapids. I think we buy DDGs from them, and then we're buying soybean meal from places. So we're not only buying, corn, we're also buying these leftover, what would I think essentially be waste from these ethanol plants, people like that, to feed to the pigs, the soybean meal from places. And so our feed mill department of production is kind of a beast of its own, because it's, I wish I could even say how many thousands of tons they do per week, but they're just delivering feed all night long, all day long. We grind all of it, mix all of it our own. There's so many, they'll change the amino acids and up this by a percent, or they'll add 0.2% salt. I mean, it's just kind of an exact science. I always think of, people think of like, oh, you just throw slop out for the pigs or scatter some corn and they dig what they want, where it's like, no, it's a exact science that different breeds of pigs grow better with different diets, and different diets are meant for different sizes pigs. So in finishing, we usually start off on what's called GF1, so it's a really, really nutritious diet, and then we slowly go to GF6, which GF6 is more like corn based, just kind of really finishing them out, less of the maybe like protein or vitamins and minerals. But over that whole life cycle, 6 different diets, and then there's the nursery diets and the sow farm diets. They have a diet for lactation, so if they're milking. They have a gestation, so if they're pregnant but not milking, they need different minerals. So, the feed mill is something that's always been interesting to me, and I always kind of pick Scott Voyna's brain on it. But it's kind of its own beast in itself.
When we're a small dairy farm, and it was always fun because I always thought, well, it's kind of like we raise our own corn, we raise our own hay, we had pasture, and we were like taking all the inputs that we could have just been hauling to town, and we were like running it through the dairy cow, and we made money every year. It didn't matter if we had a drought or wet year. We were bringing that material and running it through the cow. I mean, we were creating this product. I don't know, that in itself was what made me really proud of what we were doing. It gave me a lot of satisfaction in that. So the hog industry now is just a bigger scale of that, but it makes a huge difference. I mean, I know on my first watershed project up in the northwest part of the county, it was about mid-90s when a lot of transition came in, a lot of the hog buildings were coming in and stuff like that. But just the economic activity and the opportunity for, there's a lot of people that weren't able to raise hogs on their own anymore, and they could actually be a contractor or thing, because they always said that livestock was the gateway to young farmers into the ag. I mean, obviously, you can't just go out and buy $15,000 an acre land I mean, you got to start out somewhere, and a lot of the people were starting out with livestock, and if they didn't have these grower units and things like that, there was a lot of missed opportunity for bringing young people back in onto the farm.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how I think the Farm Bureau came out that the number three or the top three ways to get into agriculture as like a new person or young farmer was like pumpkins, finishing barns, and I can't remember the third one. But it was just crazy because it's like not a lot of people understand. And pumpkins, it's like, what is that? You know, but it's probably cheap costs to start up and easy rewards. And so finishing barns is kind of crazy because it used to be it was kind of a 10-year payoff. You usually sign a 10-year contract with a company. And so banks, you don't really need much money because banks will, if you sign this contract, they know you're set. So that's for me, it's kind of like that's one of my goals is to build my own barn within 3 years, I think. And then you just see, like you said, the economic development from that. I mean, we're ordering materials from everybody. I mean, we do so much business with Spawn and Rose in town here. The steel, and then we're having like Bob's Electric and Perry Novak. I mean, all these electric companies do wiring for us, and then we have Gertz's doing plumbing, and it's a all hands on effort. And then I always think of that the county's doing well when there's no housing, because we have so many people here working and trying to do things that housing is always a shortage here in Howard County. And so even one barn is just a huge economic boost for the city and county.
Well, before we go any farther, I can't forget to mention, when you mentioned the top 3 ways to get into agriculture or whatever, you said pumpkins were number 1, and me and Neil have had this idea for years that we're going to go down to the special place where you can buy pumpkins by the pennies. I mean, you can buy these boxes that come with 40 to 50 pumpkins for $20 a box.
Yeah.
And if you go to Hy-Vee or wherever, it's $5 or more a pumpkin. It's like, holy smoke.
We got this business plan. We're going to be pumpkin.
We just haven't got to it yet.
We
I guess when we're ready to get into the actual marketing side of agriculture, that's what we're going to start with, and then we'll see how that goes. See if we can eventually save up.
But there is money to be made in pumpkins, believe me.
I was wondering when I said it, and you guys were like looking at each other laughing. I'm like, gosh, did I say something that was wrong?
No,
or like,
we got
what?
the place. We got Neil's place right off the highway.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
Correct.
We just need a trailer that we can buy multiple boxes at a time rather than just one truckload or whatever.
Yeah.
So. We'll see. Maybe we'll explore it at some
We'll see if this business model takes off.
Neil and Hunter's pumpkins. Oh my god. Yeah. I remember once I heard that article, and I drive around, you see a lot of people with pumpkins. It's like, gosh, did they all hear that article too? Is that what they're doing?
They're even doing the self-donation boxes where it's a free will, come get your pumpkin and honor system, pay whatever they're asking and whatnot. So obviously there must be a little bit of money where they sell one, they get their $5, and 4 more disappear without any money. So it must be somewhat lucrative.
Yeah, the return on investment in pumpkins is pretty good. So,
well, I gotta quick tell this story before I forget. So I mentioned that you guys helped me out that one time. So a lot of my loads, because I obviously work during the day, they try to schedule them at night around like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever. And so I think it was like Dalton Martinic was going to help me one night at like 11 o'clock or 11:30 or something. And then the next day I needed help too. And I asked him, I said, hey, 11:30 or 11 a.m., whatever. And he said, yeah, I'll be there. And I remember clocking out of work and getting to my barn, getting ready to load, and the trailer's there. And we had to do a load or two. And, the barn's full. So for pigs, you don't just get to sell them all. You go into a pen of 30, mark 5 or 6 or maybe 8. And then ship those out, and then the next ones have more space and access to feed and grow bigger faster. And I remember calling Dalton and kind of saying like, "Oh, are you late? Like, you on your way?" And he's like, "Oh no, I think he said 11 p.m." I said, "No, a.m." And it's like all of a sudden realizing like middle of the workday, it's usually a 3-man job, and I was kind of by myself, and I was like, "Oh boy." And I don't know who I called first or second. Called a couple people, and no one's busy. And I called you, Hunter, which you had helped me load maybe the week before. And I was like, this is an emergency. Can you quick come help me load these pigs? And he said, you want me to bring Schaefer? I was like, yeah, I guess. Like, I already felt bad enough. And sure enough, you guys showed up and threw on the coveralls. I think you guys were in kind of nicer clothes. I don't know what you had going on, but it wasn't ready to load
Yeah.
pig clothes. And,
Yeah, we weren't ready for down on the farm that day. So
yeah, I was so thankful when we got them loaded, and Hunter obviously knew what he was doing, and
yeah.
you were a little new to it, but you caught on well. I mean, you
Well,
moved livestock before,
yeah.
and so
I always said you got to be the pig and don't go with the pig, not fight the pig, because it's hands down. You're not gonna win if you're trying to push a pig somewhere. You gotta like encourage them to go that way.
yeah.
So it was a very great experience. But I know afterwards we hopped in Hunter's truck and we made a beeline to his house. It was like showered, stripped out all his clothes, and it was like showered again.
Yeah, yep, yeah. I was,
Because when you're not around it, it's like, wow, I can still smell pig. But anyway, yeah. So I had a new set of clothes from Hunter that day. We getting back to work. And, no, it was fun. Like I said, it was a great experience. And I mean, every time I drive by that barn, I think of what we were doing that day. So if you ever in a bind, you know who to call.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
it
think
was
what's
fun.
kind of interesting too, I mean, every operation's a little bit different. Like I've helped Tim a few times. I helped Chaz for a little bit, and Chaz, I would say, is like the I don't know. I don't want to disgrade you, but he'd have all the pigs sorted out. It'd say load time was say 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever. We'd show up at 4:45, 10 to 5 or whatever. Throw on the clothes. You hear the truck start backing up. Grab the panels, grab the shocker, and walk in there. And it maybe sometimes would take us 10 minutes. I mean, it was put them in the alley, throw them in, count how many you need, and you're done. And then so Tim calls a couple times, like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll help you." And you come in, it's like, "All right, which we starting up?" He's like, "Oh no, we got to sort these ones still." And I was like, "All right, I've never helped sort before." And, oh my goodness, you get a very quick appreciation for those guys who sort them by themselves. And I know Chaz did it for a lot of years, sorting by himself. And I don't want to know how long it took. I don't want to know what words came out of the mouth. But holy moly, I mean, you create a new appreciation when you see these guys doing it by themselves. Or if you get stuck in a binder, then you got to sort and load by yourself. Because a lot of time the truck drivers, they're not getting out of the truck. They can't help you. And so you're on your own doing this by yourself. And yeah, these are 180 to 200 plus pound pigs that are just as stubborn as your ex-wife. And it's a blast, but it's a lot of work too.
Yeah.
It's a quick learn though. I mean, when you start to think about it, it's like you're gonna get how many pigs loaded and how many semis, and then I'm like, all right, one at a time, and then you kind of get the feel of it, and you kind of see how the building's set up, and you kind of figure out, oh, this gate will be here, and so yeah, and no, it was interesting, but like I said, it gives you appreciation when you're driving by these barns because, like I said, they're not transparent. You can't see what's going on, and there's a lot of activity there, and no, it's I think everyone should load semi hogs.
Yeah, get that appreciation. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny you bring up the sorting because I think Dalton had helped me once too, and we got done, and he kind of looked at me and he said, "I'm used to just showing up when they're already sorted." And I was like, why would I do all the hard work and then pay you to do these? So I was like, maybe it takes you an hour to sort and 30 minutes to load, or you can just do it all together and it takes you an hour. And so I always laugh. Now I explain to people, like, we're going to sort and load them. I might sort 20, but if we're doing 165, we're basically doing the whole load.
Yeah.
So that's a funny. And then you mentioned the smell of the pigs. I laugh because I have a friend kind of down near Austin, and they have a dairy. And I love agriculture. Haven't been on a dairy for, 15 years. Missing. I wanted to go and help him. And I went down and helped him, and I had my clean clothes on that day, and I thought, well, I want to wear my smelly pig clothes there. And I helped him with his calves all day, and he showed me the different stages of their cows and whatnot, and their milking part and whatnot. And the next day, I went to put on those clothes, and I thought, oh, they're clean. I'll wear them my pigs. And they just reeked.
Mm-hmm.
And I texted him, and I said, oh, dairy is the worst smelling thing in the world. Pigs don't smell at all. And he always says, no, pigs smell, dairy doesn't. So it's always funny. It's whatever you're around, you're used to, and what you're not, you don't notice it.
Don't get into the turkey or chicken barn, because then you're going to find the new kind of smell that you don't want to smell ever again.
Well, I know when we should have got the Hunter's house, all the clothes went into the washing machine instantly. And but growing up too, I was like, we knew the people that had hogs, especially on the school bus. Kids that get on the school bus because they did chores in the morning. We were like, I remember one family, they were like the last kids on and first kids off, but it was like even a mile into town that was a lot because it was like, well, somebody was doing pig chores this morning. But I don't know. Then you could say that's the smell of money too.
I was just gonna say, I can remember when you were a kid. Once we'd cross the Minnesota-Iowa border, or Iowa-Wisconsin border, you take that smell, and whether you smelt it or not, everyone always goes, "Oh, the smell of money."
Yeah. Oh, sure.
So whether it was the manure or the smell of animals or just nothing at all, it was just a mantra that you had when you come into Iowa. So
Well, funny you bring up the manure. That was one thing we talked about a little bit when we were talking about cover crops and things. But to have that renewable source of fertilizer here locally, because that, and I think I've seen too where the input costs for farms, the most energy use of anything input is fertilizer because a lot of it's mined in Africa and Canada, and it's got to be mined, cargoed to the port, sent over and shipped, sent, and then brought by rail or however, and then spread. I mean, it's a big input. Whereas here now we've got a renewable resource of and rather an organic fertilizer source instead of a commercial artificial source. Because we're gonna have a podcast about soil health coming up, not too distant down the future, but to have manure added to the soil profile has so much more benefits to that soil health than it is just commercial fertilizer, which is kind of an inert type medium. So maybe I want to talk a little bit about how much you guys use that, and that is a value added also to our community.
Yeah, so it's crazy how, and I've only been out of school for 4-ish, I'm going on 5 years here, and the value of the manure has changed so much. It used to be that I think the cost to pump it was basically the cost it was worth. So it kind of, some guys will build a barn, they don't own the ground around, so they sell the rights to manure, and that guy's just, you pump the manure, you get it, whatever. Where now I hear a lot of guys that they can have more than they need and they're selling it, just like an input, and so it's kind of something that used to just be a break even for them is now a piece of revenue for their barns. But yeah, I mean, our pits are usually about 8 foot deep. All the manure, water, spill feed, any of that stuff goes in there, so it's pretty nutritious, I guess. They're not nutritious. But those pits usually get pumped in the spring and in the fall. Everyone probably smells them when they get pumped that one day a year. And so a lot of guys like us put corn on corn because we have all those nutrients we just need to put on the field. The beans obviously have their own nitrogen, so they don't really need it too much. And so, yeah, a lot of the sites have the corn. They're pumping it twice a year. The pits are supposed to be big enough that if something were to happen in the spring or fall and we weren't able to get a pit pumped, they should last a year round. That way we don't have any emergencies or whatnot. But yeah, the manure is just a side that I don't really deal with too much, or some people might not see, or you forget about because it's obviously under the ground, you don't see it. But I mean, that might be the most important aspect for a lot of the farmers. Some guys don't really, they build a barn for the revenue and the income, but they don't really love pigs, but they think, well, gosh, I can work with pigs and I can get all this manure and think how much fertilizer, and it's always there. And so, I laugh because sometimes we'll have an influx of pigs, we'll have a few less or a few more, and you'd think these guys, they get paid on per space per year, so it's kind of a salary. So whether the pigs are in there or not, they're getting paid. And if you don't have pigs in there, they get kind of grumpy because they're like, we want that manure, get those pigs in here quick right away. So, yeah, it's a pretty big value added thing to their farms and their operations, and it's a pretty easy way to, I guess, get it on their fields. A lot of guys do drag lines now. It's kind of the newer, I don't want to say newer, but that's the most efficient way. And then if they're going to fields farther away, they pump it. And so the tankers is pretty cool because sometimes we'll have 6 or 7 tankers, and there's a guy will get in the pit, stir it, try to get all the waters and solids and mix so it's as even as possible. And then they're just tanker, fill it for 10, 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and they take off. The next one's there. I mean, it's just a barrage of just, you got to do it when the weather's right. As soon as the corn goes out, those manure haulers take off. It's a pretty crazy thing.
The other day I noticed there was a drag line out, and I'm just looking around. I can't see a barn. I mean, those umbilical cords go quite a distance too. So, and then honestly, that's kind of good because it relieves the stress on roads and things like that. So interesting.
They go a pretty long ways, and then if they need to go, I want to say you can pump it like a mile or something, and then they'll set like a booster pump up, and then they can just send it even farther, which I think is even better because like you guys talk about having the marginal ground that you don't want things that you don't want to plant things. So this we can put it on the ideal ground at the ideal time, when it works for everybody.
Well, I remember too, when a lot of people started doing their soil testing on farms, and back in the day when you didn't have a cab on the manure spreader and you're hauling manure, those areas right around the farms that were pretty hot zones of phosphorus, and then because nobody wanted to drive to the back 40 with no cab on in the winter with the wind blowing, trying to use a beater manure spreader. So you used to see that, whereas now you're getting it evenly distributed, and you've got that manure has been analyzed, so you know the value of it, and you can really spread it around. So
that's funny. I just think now they a lot of it is injecting, and so I think of back when they were doing the, I don't know what you call the term, and this flip, in the back cab window always has all the manure on it, where it's like now these guys, they just get to inject it.
Yeah, you had a great appreciation for wind and wind direction when you're hauling manure, and what direction you were going to turn, and because I did a lot of that, but I always tried to get it as far as way you could, but I always got a kick out of seeing some of these soil test maps come in, especially when they got into the really lot of testing, and you had those hot zones. I was like, yep, they didn't have a cab either. So.
Yeah, I can imagine that was one of those things that you learn pretty quick which way to turn, which way the wind was going, if it was going to be
you get caught
good day or a bad day, or how that was going to go. And
anyway, so it is a very efficient way of spreading that nutrient, and the technology continues to get better, and the more that we inject it, the less noticeable it is when you're driving in the countryside. But just for people to know that it is a valuable asset. I know we talked about that when we were talking about manure storage, and calling it a waste, and it truly isn't. It's actually a value added product, side product, byproduct of what the hog industry and the cattle do for the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely provides a lot of benefit. And then, anytime we talked about inputs, we talked about the outputs and all the money that's coming back. And that's really what it boils down to, is how much money you can bring back to this community and things like that. And that's what we've talked about a lot with our conservation, our different projects and that sort of stuff, being able to add some sort of cost share to help those farmers out that are then able to lead down and continue a longer road of success and stuff like that. So
well, and like soil health, and I always talk about Ray Archuleta. He's kind of the godfather of soil health, and we've heard some of his presentations about how having cattle or livestock on the land. Well, obviously there's new ways of animal husbandry. The ways we do it is better for the animal and efficiencies and things. But still, having that manure on the land I'd much rather be spreading animal manure on my land than commercial fertilizers. So, very
awesome. Well, we're kind of winding down here. We've been adding in the question aspect of it, and Tim mentioned that he had some questions.
Yeah.
So we're gonna let him go first on the question aspect, and then we're gonna hard press him and see what we can get out of him.
Mine aren't that hard, so I hope your guys' are pretty easy too. And I don't have that many, but I just when Neil wasn't prepared that day for questions, I was ready. So, what's the longest waterway you've ever built or been a part of?
The longest waterway. Well, actually, it almost went across an entire section, and not only did it. So it's like 2,500 first. It was like it was a mile long. It was a whole mile. It was over 5,000 feet. And what was crazy is there were like veins that went off it. And I went out to survey it that day when it was done. And it was a cold, sleety day. And I parked up on the one end. And this is back when we had to turn with the old lasers and stuff. And I started going down. And then I had to change my stations and move down. And man, when I got to the other end and I had to walk against the wind, and that truck looked like it was a toy way up there, that was probably the most miserable. And it just happened to be the biggest waterway I ever did. So yeah, it was a mile long, but beyond a mile, it had offshoots on it too.
Dang. So here's an easy one. What's your favorite farm animal?
How would you define farm animal?
Well, not dog or cat. Any livestock production animal.
I would have to say sheep. I raise sheep. actually we had sheep on our farm my entire life until just a few years ago. But I always enjoyed the sheep. I thought they were kind of intelligent, and the lambs were, I mean, obviously pretty cute. Hard to compete with a baby pig, but lambs are pretty nice too. I like my sheep.
Yeah, so I was never raised on a farm, so I didn't actually have any first-hand experience. So just my work here at the office, I would definitely say the dairy cows, only because I absolutely love milk and ice cream, and so the byproduct of what they produce is, I think, the coolest thing. And just to see the dairies that we have here, and I'll never forget when we went to NICC for a field trip. I don't know, we were probably third or fifth graders maybe, and we got the milk there and was able to put it in the coffee can, and you put I think there was salt and then obviously ice you put in the coffee can, you had to roll it back and forth, and then you had homemade ice cream right there, and we were able to open it up and eat it, and that was the coolest thing, I thought. And so I got to go with the dairy cow.
Well, my follow-up was, since you chose pigs, what's your favorite cut of meat? But we'll skip that one.
Bacon.
Lamb chops.
Anytime I always help with, whether it was you or Chaz, all I ever said, because you were always pretty level-headed. Chaz, on the other end, that guy would get so mad at the pigs, and it would be F-bomb after F-bomb after F-bomb, and I was just sitting there, and I would just be smiling, because I loved it. It was an absolute blast, and he'd get all pissed off, and I'd be like, oh, smells like bacon in here, Chaz, what do you think? That would kind of ease the mood, but oh my goodness, he would get so mad, and I'll never forget, Chuck came and helped. It was like one of the first times, and oh my God. You should never let your father help you in a hog barn. I came to this conclusion. That might have been the only time that ever happened. Holy smokes. If Chaz ever listens to this, I'll have to tell him to go to the very end of the podcast and listen, but he would just get so bent out of shape over it's like it's just a damn pig. They don't know any better. So, it's a hoot. Bacon for sure.
So since Dalton's not here and, doesn't have to pull all your signs anymore, who pulls more of your signs, or who does more flagging?
I do more flagging. He does more pulling, because I go out there and loosen him up for him, and then he just one-handed.
I always say Neil's the smartest, dumbest person there is. And if you've ever met Neil, you know this. And so I always give him a bunch of crap because our Trimble unit, it's changed 5-6 times since I've been here, which hasn't been that long. I can't imagine how many different changes Neil had to go through. And he taught me how to survey with the rod and the laser level and all that, which is, if you can't figure that one, basically if you can get the laser level, it's going to work. And if it stops beeping, it's because it's either too tall or too short. Pretty simple. The GPS unit is way more than that. And if you don't use it every day or work on the updates, it can be pretty daunting and pretty improbable to use and stuff like that. And so I always give Neil crap because I always say I'm the brains of the operation. But realistically, it's harder to lay out a waterway, I think, correctly than it is to actually do the surveying and taking the points and stuff. So we got some fresh blood coming here this fall that'll be pounding the post then.
Yeah, we're actually waiting for him to arrive, so we haven't got those cover crop signs out there yet. I thought about it too, but and now with this rain, it's going to start coming up, so people are going to expect to see our blue and white signs.
The cover crop signs are going to be the easy part this fall. Mm-hmm. I got 2 watershed signs that we're going to put up, and so we needed 6x6 posts, and usually we'll use like a 10, maybe 12 footer or whatever, just to make sure we get it tall enough over the corn. Well, Spawn and Rose didn't have 10 or 12 footers, so we ended up getting 14 footers. So, we're going to have to dig these holes a lot deeper and a lot wider than we normally do. And then the next part is lifting that sign and setting it in there. It's going to be a chore. And so,
I know who's got a sawzall. We're going to shorten those up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I said we're going to assemble it pretty close to the holes, too. So,
awesome.
All right, so I got a question for you. So, how many different breeds of pigs can you name?
Oh boy, you're gonna stump me. I could probably only name like 3. So we only have we call them large white Duroc, but it's basically a cross between like a Landrace and a Duroc. So that's all we use in the production. But I know there's like Yorkshire, there's Berkshire. Yeah, I know that was a terrible one for me. There's 4. I said 3, but yeah, there's a ton, but we only have 1.
Chester Whites, Hampshire, Spotted Pullman China. So there's
So back in the day, everybody probably had different breeds, right?
well, this is kind
Or
of
not?
funny too. Oh, yeah, they were lots of different breeds. People, I know my dad always liked to have spotted Poland China boars for whatever reason. But I remember going to pick out gilts, and I was like kind of in charge of that, and I wanted one of every kind of breed. And I always thought the prettiest baby pig was spotted Poland China boar and a red Duroc sow because you would get these little red pigs with black spots, and they were the cutest little pig. And honestly, as they grew up, they still look pretty darn cute. But yeah, crossing a lot of those. But yeah, so you just that you don't see. So when you go into the hog barn, most of them are going to be white. Every once in a while, I thought, oh, there's a special one. It's got a little bit of orange on that one. But yeah, so the number of breeds I think has like diminished, which you'll see some of the heritage breeds, some people that still do some pasture breeding will do that. But and the Berkshire was kind of the pug face pig, and I remember having a lot of those when I was a kid too. So
Yeah, I think we still get there's always the genetic fluctuations, and so we'll still get a couple red Durocs every once in a while. That'll It's kind of fun, you're used to this like whitish, pinkish pig, and then you get some red ones. But yeah, I think the Landers has the mothering skills they say, is a good milking sow, lactating sow, and then I think the Duroc is kind of a tougher breed, and so that's why they kind of cross them, and that's just the best breed.
well, I will say one other thing too is there was this big campaign of pork the other white meat, which I think that whoever thought of that probably they were trying to compete with chicken, I think. But when I was a kid, and especially like the Duroc or the Berkshire, that meat, if you had a pork roast, it was hard to tell if that was a pork roast or a beef roast. It was such a dark meat. And now obviously everything's, but you gotta prepare it correctly. But that was one thing I remember too, is like I wasn't really sure, is that a pork roast or is that on Sunday dinner table? So that's changed a little bit too.
My question, this is this has been up for debate for quite a while now, and so my question is, how old is Neil?
Hey, I'm gonna find that edit button. I am old enough to know a lot more than you.
If you can't run the GPS, I don't know if you're gonna be running the edit button much. Actually.
Yeah.
He's young enough. If he was able to come in the barn and help us sort, and if he's able to pull signs or loosen them, he's young enough.
All right,
That's
we're changing the subject back to someone just recently got married, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention your beautiful bride and your wonderful little dog.
Thank you. Yeah. I was told I'd say her name, Lucy. It's not my wife's name, that's my dog's name.
Yep.
And then next important, my wife, Bailey. So, yeah, just got married, so that's
Unfortunately, we lost him. I mean, Tim was living in Cresco for quite a while, and then had a house and whatever. And since then, he's moved on down to Calmer, which is still a pretty awesome community. But I'm sure we'll see you around, still working and running the operations and stuff. But
And I might add a beautiful home first home for you and Bailey to begin your life together. I think it's wonderful. So, excellent.
I do got some actual real questions though, and we'll see how well he listened to the previous podcast.
Me? Or
Tim.
Oh,
Me.
goodness. I was hoping I was paying attention. Usually I do.
Name and list as many CRP practices as you can.
okay. Well, I know if Neil only had one practice he could do, it would be waterways. But I don't know if by CRP practices, is it like waterways, buffer strips? Is that?
That was.
I'm thinking of conservation
you're thinking
practices.
Conservation practice. So
Well-
we'll split you around. We'll say name as many conservation practices as you can.
Okay, so waterways, buffer strips, stream bake stabilization, cover crops, CRP. Oh boy, I know there's like 1,000. Gosh, that might be it that I can think of.
Actually,
off the
that's
top of
pretty
my head.
good. He named more conservation practices than breeds of pigs. So I think that's pretty good. That testament that he listened to that podcast and the words
So
getting
then,
out.
second part of it, how many CRP codes can you list?
Oh my gosh, that alphabet soup, whatever you say.
I'll give
oh
you a
my
hint. They all
gosh.
start with CP.
Isn't it like numbers? It's like CP 140 and then like CP 101. Yeah, I don't know if I could do a single
He
one.
does need to go CP 101 class, so we may have to make a whole podcast just on our different.
Oh, man,
That's
that'd be
practices.
wild.
I don't know if you can ask me to know him because I don't know if you guys even know him.
Oh,
when
I
you
know
try to.
him.
Oh, I
Oh,
gave
I
a heck
could,
of a list
yeah.
that day.
Yeah, we're up to like 42 of them.
Well, there's more than
So-
that.
Well, yeah, there's a different. There's like
43.
subcategories.
And
Like
an
a
88.
CP38, we had like 4 different ones with subcategories. So
We'll see.
So
That might
you,
be-
yeah, we'll have you back on after we have that podcast, and then you can brush up and listen to it a few times. So
Awesome. Well, hey, we better start to wind down. I'm sure Tim's got to get to work, but before we do, Tim, you've listened to our podcast and stuff, and give us a little bit of a shout out on what you like. Let us know what you don't like, and what do you think?
emphasize what you like, honestly.
Well, I'll start with I don't like when you ask me about the CRP codes or whatever. But yeah, I do a lot of driving from barn to barns, and so when you guys were like, we're gonna start a podcast, I was like, great, I'll add it to my list. And so I think I just can relate to you guys. And obviously, I don't have my own row crops, but just having that agronomy background, I feel like a lot of things you guys talk about, I can relate to. And I just like hearing what's going on. And I know I'm not in Howard County anymore, but I feel pretty dang a part of it. So it's cool to hear about the streams you're doing and the trout, all that. And so it just kind of gives you a better understanding of what's going on in the county. Kind of like how you said, not everybody knows what's going on in a pig barn you can't see. I have no idea what you guys do every day. And so when you guys are talking about it on the podcast, just it makes it enjoyable for me and gives me a better understanding of Howard County. And
Well, I think that, I mean, ultimately why we did the podcast was to obviously get information out, reach people that either A, know about what we're doing but want to hear more information, B, tell that information. If we say something wrong, hopefully they get a hold of us and try to correct us, and then it's an educational part for us. But, I mean, the number one reason, well, I shouldn't say number one reason, one of the biggest reasons, it's harvest right now, and farmers are in the combines or in the tractors doing this and doing that, and instead of listening to country music or rock music, whatever they like to, hopefully give them something that they know who the people are. They're either a part of programs or they're a part of Howard County and have been a part of these projects and whatever. And so if it was me on the other end, I think it'd be pretty cool to be listening about, hey, they're talking about cover crops and I do 500 acres of it or whatever it is. And I know like Brandon Reese sent us a text here over the weekend that he was finishing up his cover crop seeding and got through and listened to him and stuff and really appreciated it. So I mean, we thoroughly enjoy having you on here and listening to it. I know we look every other day or so and see how many listens we got to, and we're slowly approaching that 400 listen mark, and so it's a big deal for us. We're obviously no Joe Rogans yet, but we're
Hey, we're closing in. I know he's got 3 million followers, but I think we're like 389. I mean, whatever percentage that is. But
yeah, so we're trying to
it's like,
do
we
the
gotta
best
start
we can.
somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely love it. It's been a blast, and so finally having someone else on here rather than just us talking and getting something else out there is pretty important, I think. So
Well, the opportunity to share what we do every day, because I think it's pretty neat. I really enjoy what we do, and I enjoy getting to work each day. And being where we can inform other people what the programs are and things like that. And then be a little entertaining. So there's a little back and forth, but that's how we are all day long at the office too. So
well, and just like anything else, there's always misconceptions and different ideas of what go on, and sometimes Reicks View gets that bad mantra, and to be able to get you on here and talk about the finishing units and what truly goes on in there and the hands-on everyday care for those pigs is really important, because next time you eat a pork chop or a slab of bacon, you have an idea of what went into it and all the hard work, sweat, and all that kind of stuff, because they don't just show up one day on a feed mill or whatever it is and show up on your plate. So
well, everyone's got a little fear of the unknown, and if we can open the door on what we're all doing, I think that's good for everybody. It's good for the community. It's good for what you do. It's good for what we do, and I don't know. Like I said, it's kind of entertaining too.
absolutely.
yeah, I for sure, when I messaged you guys, I was like, you should start doing guests too, and then you can really broaden. And then you guys asked me, and I was like, well, yeah, that's cool. I'll do it. I love it.
Yeah.
But like, I want to learn about a lot of other people's stuff too.
Sure.
So
Yep.
yeah, I think what you guys do is entertaining. It's cool. It's fun when you guys pick on each other and bicker. And then yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see who else you guys get on and learn more about what everyone else does.
Well, we appreciate you coming on just to enlighten us a little bit more. Like I said, we had kind of a last minute exercise in what you get to do, and I've thoroughly enjoyed that too. So excellent.
Absolutely. Well, anything else you want to mention before you head off?
Eat more pork.
Eat more pork, and hey, if I get it right, Reicks View Farms, family feeding families, correct?
Families feeding families.
Awesome. So the next time you got that pork chop or that slab of bacon cooking, always think about what's going on and where that pig maybe was raised and what it had to do to get to that point. So you create a new accomplishment or a new sense of appreciation when you got that on your plate. So thanks again, guys. We're gonna sign off here of another episode of Beyond the Dirt podcast.